Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bowhunter. I'm your host, Matty, and join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands. Searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bow hunting. Guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Becoming a Bow Hunter. Today, I'm excited to bring you guys an episode all the way from Boise, Idaho, sitting down with Camden Forrey. Camden is an awesome dude, really awesome dude. Can't talk highly enough about him, and I think you're going to understand that a little bit more as we go throughout this podcast. But realistically, unfortunately, we had only a short amount of time to kind of get through the content, and so we got to definitely get layer one down, I guess is the best way to say it, because we have agreed to do a part two. And that will come within time, but what you kind of get to have the insights to is what hunting elk and mule deer is like all the way over in Idaho, which I think is a whole lot of fun. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Guys, welcome back to Becoming a Bow Hunter. I am very excited for today. I have Camden Forrey with me. How you doing, Cam?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm so well, man. So to give a little bit of background, I started on a program probably about, 9 months ago. And it really helped me to kind of almost pivot and kickstart a new career that kind of, I guess, started really just supplementing what I was already doing as well. And Cam and the guys over at Almost Passive Income really helped me to, I guess, save my one business, my fitness business, and start up another one also in email marketing, which has been absolutely incredible and such a good journey so far. And every week I jump on a call with Cam, and it's actually funny because Cam says it's one of his favorite times of the week, but it's also definitely one of my favorite times of the week. And I think realistically what you guys have helped me with and what you've helped me to achieve and the income that you guys have helped me to, like you've literally doubled my income, which is crazy. So, thank you for that to start with, but also welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, brother. Hey, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
And it's cool because I found out early on that a few of you guys were bow hunters, and it just lit me up. I was like, wow, I'm in the right place here. Like, this is definitely the right place to be.
It's not often a connection you make, right? It's like, okay, this is going to be fun.
And it's funny because the people in the bow hunting world typically are just good eggs. It's just you once you know that someone else is willing to go out and do the hard yakky yards out in the bush with a bow, you can typically say, okay, this person is going to be a good individual. Yep.
Yeah, that's so true. You meet a lot of guys that hunt that you may or may not like rifle hunters, especially where I come from, because there can be an element that is undesirable in that community, but you're dead on. Bow hunters, like, man, they're just good folks. You know, you don't meet a lot of bow hunters. You're like, that guy's terrible. I don't like that guy at all.
No, I agree. And so, dude, tell us a little bit more about, like, where are you based? You're over in Boise, Idaho.
Yeah. So I'm in Boise, Idaho. So for those that aren't familiar, kind of Intermountain West, Boise is the capital city of Idaho. I was born and raised here. I'm 35 years old now. So just to kind of give an idea, growing up here, Boise was a much smaller town than it is now. About 100,000 people in Boise growing up, and Idaho is a pretty small state, big geographically, but just under 1 million people population. Boise's experienced massive growth, and so that's definitely changed the game from a hunting standpoint. A lot more pressure than there was growing up. But yeah, born and raised in Boise. I live about a mile from where I grew up, and so didn't make it too far from where I started. But when you live in a place like this with all the opportunities we have from an outdoor recreation standpoint, it'd be a hard place to leave.
Yeah, definitely, dude. And so, what kind of got you into the hunting? Was it the fact that you were so close by to it, or was your dad or someone in the family already into it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a multi-generational thing. So I grew up hunting, mostly bird hunting with my dad and my grandpa. And so a lot of upland game when I was younger. So pheasants, chuckers, quail, all upland game behind bird dogs. We had German short hair pointers growing up. And then my dad got a pair of Vizslas, which are these kind of orange, rusty colored pointing bird dogs.
Like a ridgeback without a ridge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Super athletic, great hunting dogs, but also they kind of have a personality almost like a golden retriever. Like they're a really interesting breed because they're really good at home. They're kind of lazy at home, but once they get out in the field, they turn it on and they really go. So, and then did quite a bit of deer hunting growing up, but all rifle. Didn't do any bow hunting growing up. And it was definitely always a family affair. Hunting with my dad, my brother, and my grandpa. My grandpa is 93 now. He just gave up hunting about 5 years ago. So well into his 80s, he was coming out with us and obviously slowing down. But my dad, he's a fanatical hunter. And so, yeah, it was kind of the lifestyle I grew up with. It was in the blood. And so absolutely loved it. Started early. When I was like 2 years old, my dad would put me in the backpack and hike me around that way. And so then once I could walk, then I was toddling around behind him, first carrying a toy gun and then a BB gun. And then eventually when I was 12, old enough to start doing it. But in the Forrey household, that was all I looked forward to when I was a kid, was being old enough to be able to go hunting and kind of get into this lifestyle that I'm into now.
Dude, that's incredible. And it's interesting because my daughter is 2 now, and I often think about how she would actually go if I was to either strap her on my back or what. And I think she'd actually really love it, but I don't think would be very successful at all. I mean, as a hunter in general, I'm not that successful.
No, that's true. And it's interesting because, I got to do that a lot with my dad. I've got 3 kids, as you know. So my kids are 7, 5, and 2. As much as I loved that when I was little, I haven't been as aggressive about getting my kids out. I've taken a more relaxed approach, and probably some of that's my personality. My dad is, he's a really intense kind of guy, go getter. Mm-hmm. I'm a little bit more laid back. And so I love taking my kids, but it's 2 very different experiences. Mm-hmm. When you're going hunting with your kids, the main goal is to try to make it fun because you're trying to help sort of instill this love of this thing. And then when you're going on your own, the main goal shifts and you're more focused on success and enjoying yourself and going really hard. And so it is, you kind of got to decide before you're going to go, like, okay, is this going to be a kid trip where I'm trying to make this fun? Or is this like going to try to be a productive hunting expedition where we're going to focus on more of the hunting and less of just trying to keep it easy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so far all I've done is pretty much taken her to the camping part with me, and we experienced the animals in general. And then I actually have butchered up in front of her quite a lot. And that I think is really important because it starts to make it okay.
Yep.
It makes it okay. Really, it generalizes what should be a generalized thing, I think.
Yep, exactly, and that's exactly what we've done too. Is both big game and small game. We do all of our own. Obviously field dress and do all of our own butchering. And from the very get go, getting them involved, letting them hold a bird, letting them see the animals. They understand the circle of life. And so many kids don't even get to see where their food comes from. They don't have any concept of it. And I think that's part of the reason why there's this huge disconnect and we're so unhealthy as a civilization, because people don't understand where their food comes from. They don't know how to procure it. They don't know how to process it. And so there's this disconnection, sort of, and that they're not connected to the food at all and the process of deriving that food.
Definitely, dude. There's a bit of a war on meat right now, and it's horrible to see what's happening. I think, unfortunately, some of the people with the most money in the world, people like Bill Gates, are really intrigued on making everything regenerative land, essentially, where he goes and just makes his own food and sells that off to the world, and that's going to obviously keep filling his pockets, but at the same time, it's going to completely kill the meat industry. So, I think as much as we can do as hunters to keep fighting against that, and I mean, keep spreading the word about how good meat actually is and how much of a natural resource it actually is for humans and how much we actually need to thrive off of it, or how much we do thrive off of it. I think it's just, it's becoming more and more evident that we need to stand our ground than ever before. Yeah,
I totally agree. I think we would all agree that sort of the mechanized, sort of agriculture system, when you envision huge feedlots with like grain-fed cattle, that's not good for anybody, right? It's a terrible experience for the cows. It's bad for the land. It's bad for the humans. But, as we're seeing this sort of war on meat, I think, like you said, emerge, and it's really ramping up, both ecologically, politically, financially. There's all this pressure. But there's a lot of voices that are coming out and talking about, sort of real sustainable agriculture and permaculture, where you have farms that are integrated with livestock. And so then the livestock ends up resembling in its form and function much more like wild game. And I'm with you. I mean, there's nothing I'd rather feed myself and my kids than a wild game animal. It's like, it's the best free range, organic, hormone free critter. And that animal's lived a really good life, and I think all that, even if we can't maybe quantify what that looks like from a molecule standpoint, it's just the fuel is different when you eat it, when it's an animal that's lived a good life, a wildlife, versus something that grew up in a misery in a tank, somewhere. And so I totally agree. I think we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our kids to sort of stand firm on this value that hunting is good, and I think the American model is the one I'm familiar with. But the thing that is really remarkable is the level of conservation and protection for the land and for the animals that hunters have played. It's really been the hunters that have spearheaded the conservation movement. And we've seen incredible growth in animal populations across a bunch of different species as a direct result of that big effort here in the States, at least, which is what I'm familiar with.
Yeah, definitely, dude. And I think it's unfortunately, like, we just don't have the same sort of things in place over here. They haven't realized how much of a natural resource it is and how much they can utilize it. But I think to kind of show as a standpoint, like, if you look at humans in the civilizations, like the big cities, essentially, it's where you see the most overweight people. It's where the same sort of process is happening, where they're just getting fed shitty food consistently, full of stress in the lives that they lead. And all of a sudden they've got shitty quality life because their health is just so far backwards. And essentially it's exactly what you see in a feedlot animal. Whereas if someone's kind of a bit more free and roaming and doing those sorts of things, essentially they have a lot less stress because they're getting in touch with nature a lot more. And I think it just you can just connect it so easily. You can see the dots, how they join, but at the same time, it's just there's that big disconnect where people just don't believe it as well. It's unfortunate.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to organize people when they're all spread out, right? And so I can see why in a lot of senses, having everyone stacked up and tight in these cities makes sense. But on the other hand, it just, a lot of people just aren't living great lives when they're in that locked into that city life, like you said, eating all, food that's wrapped in plastic that was built in factories. They're not getting a lot of sunlight. They're not getting their feet, connected to the earth. They're not, getting out and moving around in nature. And so all that stuff, it just, it doesn't create a real high quality of life.
Yeah, working hours to pay the bills just to do it all again, pretty much. No extra joy, which is unfortunate. And so you were talking about supplementing, obviously, the meat for the family to use. Is that something you do successfully? You try to do? Like, how much are you guys kind of eating game?
Yeah. So we it obviously varies year to year. So here in the States, I'm not sure is your audience mostly in the States, mostly international?
It's really a mixture. So give us a full rundown of what Idaho and how it works. If you like.
Yeah. So growing up, like I said, mostly bird hunting, and a little, deer hunting with rifles. It was about 6 years ago, actually. So similar time frame to you, that I first picked up a bow. It was actually one of my boss at ClickBank, which is the company I used to work for, was an archery guy. He was selling a bow, and I was like, well, that'd be kind of fun. I could extend my hunting season. So picked up a bow, and it was instantly in my blood. And now probably 80% of what I do is bow hunting, elk and deer. I'll bird hunt every now and then, but only if I can't go archery hunting. But so the way the season works here is in the spring, we can hunt turkeys and we can hunt bears. And then in the fall, starting in August, from August through till about mid-January is kind of prime time. And so bird season starts in August. We can hunt elk with bows in September. And then we can hunt deer with bows in September, deers with rifle in October, and then deer with bow again in November. So big game season is sort of September, October, November. So for deer and elk, I can get one tag each typically. Sometimes I can get a second tag for either species, but usually I just hunt one tag a year per species. So I gotta, it's not some parts of the country people can get 4 or 5, 6 deer. That's not the case. Now we're hunting mule deer, so they're big bodied deer. and then Rocky Mountain elks, they're big bodied elk. And so if we kill one, it usually lasts us about a year. So what we do is we do all of our own butchering. So we field dress, quarter them, bring them home, and then we do the entire butchering process. So break it down from a quarter down into steaks, into grind. We grind our own, and then we vacuum seal everything and freeze it. If I was more successful as a hunter, I'd love to have a higher percentage of our meat be derived from hunting. At this point, it's probably 30-40% of our total, sort of family protein consumed is from game. But yeah, that's definitely, like you and I talked about, I would love someday to have all or most of it be derived from game meat. That would be, I just think there's something about eating game meat, not only the health piece, but just the satisfaction of knowing that you procured this. You've got your blood, sweat, your tears. You're planning. That good suffering that goes into the whole process. All of it is poured in. And so there's something really meaningful about putting game meat on the table. And feeding your family with that the meat that you helped procure.
Yeah, 100%, man. And so I mean, there's so many directions I want to go. Let's go back to your hunting season. So in regards to if you get a elk tag for bow season and you miss out in September, can you then go again in November?
Some of the tags. So the way that it works is the state is broken down into, I think it's 60 units. And so units are, here they're about the size of a county. So that's a reasonable sized chunk of land. Then with elk, what they do is they have usually 3 or 4 units as in like a game management unit. Mm-hmm. And so each game management unit usually has 2 different tags. There's an A tag and a B tag. And so as a hunter, you have to pick what elk management unit and which tag you want to hunt. And so most of these hunts are over the counter. If you're a resident, you're guaranteed to get a tag, relatively inexpensive. Like I think our elk tags are $35, so pretty inexpensive for residents. But you have to pick your area and pick your tag. Usually the A tag is more rifle centric. And so the rifle hunt tends to be in October for bulls. Mm-hmm. And then the B tag tends to be more bow centric or more short range weapon centric. Yeah. And so there's almost always a hunt, which is through the entire month of September, which is when the bulls are rutting. And that's usually either sex. So you can shoot a cow or a bull. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of those hunts will have a second chance hunt, which is either like a rifle cow hunt in October or like a muzzleloader cow hunt in November or December. Yep. So like the tag that I'm hunting this year, I hunted all September. I didn't kill a bull. There is a muzzleloader tag in December that I could go back and try to kill a cow with a muzzleloader. Okay. So there are a lot of, oftentimes there's like a second chance, like more of a meat hunt. And so we usually hunt bulls primarily in September or exclusively, and sort of think if we can't get a bull, then maybe we'll go chase cows with the later hunt.
And so muzzleloader is the hand-loaded rifle, right? Like it's the old school.
Yeah, exactly. The old school. Yeah. You put the ball and the powder and everything. So about 100 yards effective range on a muzzleloader, and obviously with a rifle, we shoot, out west because it's big country, typically big caliber rifles with big optics. So pretty comfortable shooting out to like 500 yards with the rifles, and then bows, 50, 60 yards.
Yeah. Far out. And so, let's kind of talk about actually, so you said you hunt deer as well. Is it mainly and only mule deer, or have you kind of traveled around a bit hunting other deer as well?
There are whitetail and there are mule deer here in Idaho. I've mostly hunted mostly hunted mule deer. And we hunt, it's high desert is the country where we're deer hunting. And so it's really mountainous, but more sagebrushy, more open, not real foresty. Yeah. And so it's all, hiking and glassing. So you spend a lot of time behind good binoculars looking for bucks. In October, when the deer hunting is happening, they're not rutting. So it's just spot and stalk. The mule deer don't respond well to calls. So that's just, you're just walking, looking, kind of trying to find them and spot and stalk. There are some, especially up north, there's whitetail hunting. And so then you get guys with the tree stands and kind of the traditional whitetail culture. But down here in Boise, where we're in southern Idaho, it's open, hiking, spot and glass and kind of mule deer hunting.
I think that's kind of the more enjoyable hunting style anyway, right?
I couldn't sit in a blind. Like I respect it. I know that there's a whole art and science of that game. Mm-hmm. If you can get me to sit still for more than 20, 30 minutes, we're doing really good. Like that's me being patient if I'm going to sit somewhere for 30 minutes. Yeah. One of the things I love about deer hunting is it's always you're one ridge away. Right? If I can get over this next ridge, it looks like there's going to be a buck over there. It looks like there's going to be a buck over there, and so you just keep going.
Yep.
Yeah, and then pretty soon you're like, oh shoot, I'm 6.5, 7 miles from the truck. And then you start to think like, man, if I kill one back here, I'm really going to pay for it. And you start the kind of buck you want to shoot changes as you get further and further from the truck, right? You get pickier and pickier as you get further from the truck. When you're close, any old buck will do. You get far enough away, you're like, I'd really have to suffer for this thing if I was going to kill one back here. So I better make it count if I'm going to do it back here.
A real big one. And so you kind of talked about hunting being a bit of a family affair for most of your life. What is your approach with calling an elk? Are you guys a cow call mainly, or are you bugling a lot? Like, what's your kind of approach with that?
Yeah. So so it's still mostly my dad and I. We hunt together almost exclusively. My little brother hunts a little bit, but he hasn't gotten into archery. He more focuses on duck hunting. It's at this point we're probably 70% bugling, 30% cow calling. Yep. And we probably used to be exactly the opposite of that. We probably used to be more heavily focused on the cow calling than the bugling. There's a guy here, he lives up in McCall. His name is Paul Adele. He runs a business, and he is wildly successful. So he's, him and his son, there's the stats that they talk about are eye popping. They've killed, 60, 70 bulls all over the counter public land hunt, like wildly successful. But he has an app called the Elk Nut app. It's like a buck or two, right? Like the economics of this business, it doesn't make any sense to me as an entrepreneur, as a guy who likes to make money. I'm like, Paul's doing great work. He's an incredible teacher, but his business, doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. But we really learned a lot from him. So it's the app. It's a really cool app, and we've learned from some other guys. I love Jacobson and Steve Ranella and some of these other guys. But yeah, just the influence of these guys that are teaching elk calling. We've moved a lot more to bugling, and that's just part of it's a lot more fun. Calling a bull in with the cow calls is good, but if you get a bull bugling and sort of going back and forth like that, that's what it's all about. That's a real life-changing experience.
Yeah, definitely do. It's interesting because I relate it back to our red deer and the hunts I've been on. And quite early on, someone told me not to really bother with the roaring. Like the first roar I went out in, I roared a bit, and every time I'd roar, they'd go completely quiet. But they would. What I actually found out at the end of the hunt is that they would actually come looking for me, and they would just keep quiet and they'd just come right on in. Whereas with the hind calls, they were running in constantly. Like they would just come straight to you. So my kind of approach has been, okay, well, I may as well hind call because they'd come to you instead. And they come in like a horny teenager. So it makes more sense. But at the same time, I'm not seeing the big bulls at all. And I've had constant call-offs where I've had a big stag, and I've had a stag literally on the other side of the mountain, like just around the ridge from me. And I will hind call for an hour, and he would just roar at me and not move at all. And so... it is kind of interesting. I think what I will try moving forward is maybe doing a few more roars, because I think the big boys are more concerned about having like main pride and
the territorial piece.
Exactly right. So it's like, hey, if you can do a few hind calls and then get the roars happening once you've kind of located them, got pretty close, then I think the fight's kind of on.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things that we've started to do that's really, we've created a lot more chances for ourselves and killed some more bulls is this idea. Because what we used to do is if we get a bull talking, we would set up and sit and wait. And we were trying to call that bull into us. And we were having that exact same experience you are, where they would come in to maybe 100 yards, and we're hunting pretty thick timber with elk hunting. So, you can't see very far. But they would hang up, where they'd be out at 100, 150 yards, bugling, but they wouldn't be coming any further. And what we've learned from some of these guys that we started learning from is they're doing the same thing. They're expecting you to come to them, right? And a lot of what we've been learning about is not all elk calls are, it's not just a sound they make, but there's a whole language, and so you can start to pick up like, okay, that bull, like what we call it chuckling, when they do this kind of just back and forth. What they're doing is they're calling the cow into them. And so we were worried about pushing them because it's pretty thick stuff. And so we're like, if we go walking through, we're going to be noisy. But if you think about it, they're expecting something to come crashing through the woods, right? Because they think there's an elk. And so we've gotten a lot more aggressive on, if we get within a few hundred yards and we have a talking elk, we'll make elk sounds and then we'll move in and try to get set up. Now we used to set up and try to call them into bow range. Now we do a lot more where we'll crash in, calling our way in to within 100 yards or closer. That's really what we're trying to do, is get within 100 yards of where we think that elk is, and then we'll set up and try to call them in, instead of like trying to call them in from a couple hundred yards away. That was a mistake we were making before, is we thought if we were within earshot, we'll just call them to us. And so getting more aggressive has definitely been something that's helped our game, and created a lot more opportunities for good bulls.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's interesting, like the first time I was ever out with the reds during their mating season, like that, the roars that they create is just incredible. And I can just imagine the bugling to be just the exact same, like the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. It's just crazy experience. It is one of the most,
it's just one of the most remarkable experiences. I think what I tell people is like, it's one of those moments in your life where they're like, there was your whole life before that moment, and there was your life after that first time you hear like a really definitive bugle, and I get goosebumps just talking about it, thinking about it. The elk, I think very much, I haven't experienced the red stag, but I think very similar. It's just such a majestic creature. Like, their sounds are deafening and alarming and huge. It's this giant noise they make. And then when they move like through the woods, they almost look like they're gliding. Like they're so athletic and so strong. They don't have to, their bodies don't move around like a horse's body would, or like a mule's body would. They're so athletic and so strong. They just kind of float. And there's this very like mystical quality to, especially a big bull. When you see a big full bodied bull with that rack, it's just like, it's overwhelming. It's an incredible thing.
I mean, just to watch how they actually maneuver as well when they've got a big rack, and like they'll just kind of tuck their head around and do their things just to just make it part of their body, even though it's not with them all the time. They just know how to adjust to it.
It's amazing because you get out there and, you and I are tromping through the woods. We're making a lot of noise. It's like a struggle, right? And you look at our size frame versus theirs, and then they just glide and they have these huge racks over their heads. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how they do it. The other thing that really I love is when, let's say you bump an elk, right? Or if you see an elk move and you try to go cut it off, it's amazing because you'll see it. You're like, oh, that thing's not moving that fast. And so you'll try to go get around it. And the rate that they travel, even when they're just like kind of casually cruising, they're so much faster than us. It gives you an appreciation for like the level of athleticism that you're dealing with, where I've learned if you bump an elk, like it's game over. There's no reason to try to catch up. There's no reason to try to cut them off. Like if I bumped elk, it's that I blew it. It's not going to happen at that point.
Do they honk at you, or like do they make any warning calls if they kind of know you're there?
Mostly the cows will. So the cows, they call it a bark. Yep. So cow sounds, I'm going to butcher this. This is going to be embarrassing, but a cow sound, I have calls somewhere around here, but I'll make it with my mouth. So cow sound when they're talking to each other is kind of a ew, ew. It's kind of and then when they bark, which is their alarm call, is an oh, oh. Okay. And so when you hear a cow bark, the gig is up. The bulls, they'll do something similar. It's a really short bugle, but really the cows are kind of like the alarm system inside of the herd. And so they especially will bark if they smell you. They'll see you, and that doesn't bother them as much. But if they catch your wind, they're out of there.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to show people is like the sound that deer make, but also the honking that they make. Like quite often, unfortunately, a lot of my footage is literally me getting right up close, and then they just realize me. They just get that swirl of wind, and then the big honk as they run away, and people are just like blown away by that sound. Like that comes from that thing. Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm curious because I haven't done any of this. I've threatened to a couple times, but never got serious about it. Talk to me about your experience of starting to film your hunts. Did you hunt before you started filming, or have you always filmed your hunts?
Now I tried both ways, and to be honest, I put a lot of pressure. It put more pressure on me than it needed to. And so when I finally put down the camera and just started hunting, I started enjoying it a lot more, and I got I was a lot more successful with it. It was funny that it was like the subconscious mind just putting that pressure on you, like, oh, hold up, you need to make a great film and whatever else. But realistically, once I forgot the camera one time was what was the transition for me.
Interesting.
I had a really like stellar hunt that weekend. And so now I kind of go 50-50. Sometimes I'll pull it out. Sometimes I won't. What I've been doing is I've been hunting with someone a lot more recently. Like a lot of my hunts have been solo up until just recent. And so it means that you can kind of film them, they film you a little bit. And that's cool because you just take a phone and it's all fine.
Yep.
But yeah, I think as depending on how your approach is, but for me, it was an unnecessary pressure that I put on myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. Yeah. And I've had that experience, even not only with filming, but even just kind of getting hung up in this idea of like my tag fill rates. And like, that when I start putting a lot of pressure on myself to kill critters, then it's not that much fun. It becomes a job in its own way. And so I've really tried to step back from that and say, what's going to happen is going to happen. I'm going to focus on enjoying this, being present. Of course I always want to be as successful as possible. But as I've gotten older, I've really started to experience that I can have a successful hunt, which doesn't necessarily mean I had to kill something. I can have incredible experiences. I probably almost would even prefer now a hunt where I have like a lot of interaction with elk and I don't kill one than like if I just kill the one that I saw, because it's those experiences that you accumulate that are even more valuable than the meat, and the horns and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of my favorite hunts are the ones that I've literally stomped around for the whole weekend and then only seen something at the very end. It's like just the amount, the appreciation of how much hard work you can actually achieve in a weekend is pretty interesting, and how good that can make you feel, even if in the moment you absolutely hated it.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think, the other thing for me is I do my best thinking. Like every year, my best ideas all emerge in September because it's this month where I spend most of my time away from the computer, away from the business. I just get a chance to really think, and you get through like a lot of, it's almost like you get caught up on latent thinking tasks that were due the first like week out in the woods. But then after that, now you're in like uncharted territory. You can get like really proper, big thinking to happen. And so it is, even from a business perspective, such a valuable thing to be able to go away, and kind of let the thoughts unfold, not be on the phone, no distractions, just you and your thoughts. You can get a lot of thinking done in that environment.
Definitely, dude. I went on a boys camping trip last weekend, and it was just, we were 40 minutes out of a reception, and it was just so interesting because I do that quite often, but for most of these guys, it was the first time they've done it in literally years. And just to watch them like unfold and just become so relaxed, like it was really cool to kind of watch it process. Like the first day, they're almost like checking their phones constantly, and then they finally learned just put it down and enjoy the time away from it. It was really good. Yeah, that's so cool. And that's when, then real meaningful, like authentic connection occurs, right? It's the irony that it takes that getting disconnected from all of society to create that really deep one-to-one connection with people, and some of the best relationships I've built have been, around a campfire out in the backwoods, away from it all. We also added some shrooms into the mix, so made that connection even better. That helps. Big connection then for sure. Exactly. Let's talk about like some of the shots you've actually been able to take then. Like, are you pretty much a broadside shot only with the bow, or do you experiment a little bit? Yeah. So let me think about this. Every elk I've killed was a broadside shot. And so I would do the one other shot, broadside and quartering away obviously are my two favorite shots. Yep. I'm really comfortable out to 50 yards. I've got a 60-yard pin. If everything else was perfect, sort of no wind, if the elk wasn't aware I was there and I had an elk at 60, I'd probably shoot at 60. Yeah. The other shot I would do that I feel pretty comfortable with is the brisket shot, like the facing towards me shot. Yeah. I'd say like out to like 20 yards. So if you're in really thick stuff, are you familiar? Do you know Corey Jacobson? He's a big elk personality, like elk hunting personality, kind of media guy here in the States. Maybe has he been on Meat Eater or anything like that? The name sounds familiar. I don't know if he's been on Meat Eater, but he's that kind of guy. He's like a Remy Warren or like a Steve Rinella. But his big thing is elk, elk archery. He's got a couple of really good YouTube videos breaking down the anatomy of the brisket shot. Cause I always, in my head, I didn't love that. Cause I was like, there's too many ribs and bones and things like that. But he actually, in a couple of these videos, he field dresses an elk and he opens up the front of the elk and shows there's this, it's the thing for me that really changed my perspective on it is the brisket size on an elk is almost the same size as the entire vital area on a deer when it's broadside. And so in my head, it's easy to shoot a deer at broadside, right? That's what you're looking for. But then when I had the the elk is such a bigger critter that brisket shot really can be a valuable shot. So I haven't killed one with a brisket shot. But that's kind of that's my thought is I would take a brisket shot if I had an elk coming straight at me, call it 20 yards or closer. Yeah. But then definitely prefer broadside shots, and pretty comfortable out to like 50, with the broadside shot with the bow. It's really interesting you say that. on my last hunt that I went on, we were out chasing deer, but we were in this creek system, and these pigs came down into the system. And I got into probably like 12 meters, something like that. Like I was pretty close on them, and it just wouldn't give me a shot. And I was about to leave the creek, and the only shot it was giving me was a front-on shot. It was just walking straight at me, and it was just about to tuck off and go up the hill. And I'd never done a front-on shot before, and I was like, you know what? Now's a good time to try. Like, if you're ever going to try, a pig's probably the best chance to go for it.
Totally.
And I lined it up like exactly where I thought would be the perfect place for it. And sure enough, it did the job. Like, it was down within 50 meters.
Nice.
And it was just like, it gave me a lot of confidence actually taking that shot for once, because I've seen it taken so many times and never thought that I would be someone who would take that shot. But being in that close proximity, I think you're exactly right. If you're very close and you know exactly what you're doing, like I would happily take that shot on a deer now after practicing it with a pig, which is kind of interesting to say. But I definitely feel a lot more confident in it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I look forward to the chance to do it because it's a really lethal shot. You've got, because you've got the two great big arteries, and then it's also pretty easy access to the lungs and the heart through the front of that chest cavity. So, yep. Yeah. Let's see. But yeah, that's kind of that's the philosophy. I just bought a new bow 2 years ago, and that definitely helped because my old bow, I didn't feel good out past about 40. And that was just, the technology wasn't very good. And so upgrading the bow helped, extend that.
You guys were what influenced me to buy my new bow too. So I think we all got 2020 bows around the same time.
Yep.
So yeah, did you get, maybe you got 2021. I can't remember. What'd you get? You got the Hoyt?
It's a 2020. Yeah, I got the Hoyt RX4. So the carbon fiber, which I love, and Ian, so my partner in Almost Passive Income, he influenced me. So I tend to be pretty cheap. That's sort of my personality. I've gotten good at making money. I'm not very good at spending it. Right. And so, which is good, right? It's a good way to, you generate wealth that way. The problem was what I've discovered, and Ian's been a big influence on me. We'll go off the reservation here a minute. But the problem with that lifestyle is you never really feel wealthy that way, right? Yeah. Because your relationship with money is based on scarcity. Even no matter how much you make, if you have that scarcity relationship with spending it, you never really do develop like a open, wealthy relationship around money. Mm-hmm. And so Ian was talking to me. We went to the bow shop, and we were looking at bows, and he's like, "Why don't you just buy the best one?" He's like, "You love to elk hunt. Like, this is your favorite thing to do in the world. It's all you talk about. Like, if you're going to have the best of anything, you might as well buy the best bow there is." And, so it was completely outside of character. It's not how I normally operate, but bought, really, really high end carbon fiber bow. And I love it. I love shooting it. I love hunting with it. And so he's dead on, if it's not a commercial for spending money recklessly, but especially if it's like your thing, if it's the thing you're passionate about, you should spend some money on the gear that allows you to do the thing that you love to do.
100%. That same conversation I think he had with us, and it did the exact same thing to me. I was like, you know what? Yeah, fuck it. I'm going to go out and buy one. Like, it's something that I always wanted to, but just never really gave myself the chance to do it. And when I finally did, it was the biggest game changer. And like you said, my old bow, I was grouping at 20, what I now group at 40 or more. And so it's such a big difference just having that gear. And so many times you hear, I can't even remember what the old saying is, like, pay once, cry once, or something like that. Whereas if you pay less, you cry lots, pretty much. And so the whole concept of starting off with cheap gear, eventually it's going to break and be shitty. Whereas if you buy expensive, you're pretty much going to have good quality.
Yeah, exactly. And it lasts, because the other piece is I think you do take better care of it, right? Because you're like, okay, this was an expensive piece of equipment. So you take better care of it, and it tends to be higher quality, so it lasts longer. Did you end up getting the Hoyt too? Or which one did you get?
I've got the Elite, the Cure.
Okay.
And I got it mainly based on the fact that it was a lot more tunable from home. So I don't need a bow press apart from if I need to change the string. And so in that regard, it made a lot of sense to me. But since having it, I've never had to adjust it because it was tuned in for me, paper tuned from the start, and I've never had to touch it since. So it's been,
just shoots.
It's been gold. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you run a multi-pin setup or a single pin for your sight?
I've got a 3-pin slider. And so I've got it set at 20, 30, 40 meters. And then my 40 pin becomes my 50 or 60. And that's all I've ever actually shot out to. And at the same time, I actually had a shot at 60 the other day. Like I had a shot on some deer at 60 meters, and I was with a rifle hunter, and it's just not something I do enough. So I just said, man, you take it.
Yep.
Like, it's all you.
Totally.
I mean, we were there for a meat trip, so I was like, you may as well get one down rather than
do it easy.
One. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. I had this is my first time, they talk about it's inevitable as a bow hunter, but I had my first bad hit this year on a deer, a big buck, big 4-point. And so we saw this deer, sort of got stalked in. I had my spots picked out 20, 30, 40, felt really good about him. He came across, I thought he was at like 33. And so I held my 30-yard pin and I held right about the center of his body, shot. I felt pretty good about the shot. But then when I went and found my arrow, it was a clean pass, had bled, from the broadhead all the way to the fletches. So I'm feeling pretty good about things. Went back to where I shot and ranged it, and it was right at 20. So I had botched my range. Yeah. And so I hit high, there's that, they call it like that dead zone between the top of the lungs and the spine. Mm-hmm. So didn't find him. So it's the first time that's ever happened where I hit an animal and didn't recover it. And it's rough. I mean, it's brutal going through that. And so it definitely, I think, like you said, I'd much rather not shoot, and I'd much rather miss than get a bad hit. It's sort of one of the things you learn is to do this for a little while. Bad hits suck. It's just, it's heartbreaking.
Dude, I actually had like literally the exact same thing happen this year on a young stag, and it was a downhill shot and got him straight through no man's land. And it's interesting. No matter how much I got told, like that deer's going to be fine. Like my dad's a vet. I talked to multiple vets who hunt, and they were all just like, "Man, it's fine. Like as much as it sucks, that deer's going to be completely a-okay, but it still just sucks." Like that. Yeah, that guilt you feel. And I think realistically, if we didn't feel that guilt, if we didn't feel that guilt, I don't think you should really be hunting. You've gone too far.
Totally.
You've got no emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly what I went through. Everyone's, it's so funny you say that. One of our good buddies who we grew up hunting with is a vet. And so we talked to him about it, explained the shot, and he said the exact same thing. He's like, look, because we looked hard, he's like, if you didn't find it, that thing's probably still running around. It's probably just fine. They don't bleed a lot from that spot. And then, on Meat Eater, in one of the episodes, Ranella has a bad hit on a bull with a muzzleloader. Yeah. And one of the things he talks about that was sort of an interesting way to think about this is because he was talking through, he's such a great communicator of ideas, but this idea that you killed the animal, but like there's nothing wasted in nature, right? Like let's say you shoot an animal and it dies. If you think about the greater ecosystem as sort of like the living thing, like things are living and dying all the time. And so that doesn't resolve you of the responsibility. And like you said, I think there's a really healthy weight of responsibility you carry as a hunter to do a really good job, and to make good, clean, ethical kills. But there are some elements to that help. If you're really struggling with the guilt around that of a bad hit, it's like, at the end of the day, that animal's going to die. And so you played a part and nothing is wasted, right? You feed a bear, you feed coyotes, there's a whole ecosystem that's ready to take advantage of the animal dying, even if you don't recover it.
Yeah, that kind of gave me a bit of relief a few weeks ago. I was struggling with not taking all of the meat from an animal. And then one of my other guests was like, dude, like, don't worry. That's just going to feed the others. I'm like, of course.
Right.
Like, it just
it's not wasted. It's not wasted, right? Like, you may not take it home and eat it, but something will find it and eat it and be really, really glad that it did.
Yeah, definitely. And so how about the bear front? Have you done much bear hunting?
I haven't. No, there's a really healthy bear hunting community here. It just wasn't something we did growing up. I've gone a couple times. I've never killed a bear. And so, there's a fair bit of predator hunting though. There's bear hunting, mountain lions. We can hunt wolves now, but we didn't hunt predators growing up. It's a different game from like a gear, strategies, tactics standpoint. And so I haven't done a lot of bear hunting.
And so with a lot of the stuff they're doing over there, is it baited or is it all dog hunting or what do they do?
Both. Well, so all the above. So with bears, you can hunt bait, you can hunt dogs, or you can spot and stalk. So if I was going to do it, I would spot and stalk just because I don't have dogs and I don't have the patience to sit bait. That's definitely the guys that kill a lot of bears. That's what they do. They're sitting on bait. That's the most effective way. And then the wolves, the wolf hunting, it's a very complex sort of nuanced topic. We used to have wolves, which were eradicated in the 70s. And then the government reintroduced wolves about 15 years ago, but they're a different subspecies. They're the Canadian timber wolf, so they're much bigger. And so wolves are not very popular among either the hunting or the ranching communities because they can get into people's cattle, and then they also have an impact on game. So when they first were reintroduced, they were very protected. And then once they were delisted off the federal sort of protection register, they had some very limited hunting, and the wolf numbers keep climbing, which is not surprising. They're incredible animals, very tough, and they're hard to hunt. And so they continue sort of expanding the tools that hunters are allowed to use. And now, like it's open season. You can spotlight them, you can bait them, electronic calls. Like they've really opened up the whole gamut. And still, people aren't very effective. They're just smart, wily,
witty.
Yeah. So they're thriving. And I don't know. Coming from a hunting family, the default attitude is to hate wolves and not to be a fan of wolves. But I can't help but admire them as a species. I think it's kind of a lazy thing for a lot of hunters to say there shouldn't be wolves because they just don't want the competition. So I don't know. It's something I'm not qualified to speak on it in a real meaningful way, but it is an active conversation around sort of predator management and wolves and elk. It's definitely it's a contentious topic. Most people have really strong opinions one way or the other. There's not a lot of people that are right in the middle.
Yeah, I remember one time I put up a picture of a dog that I'd killed, and I had someone post up about how cruel it was, and that they would happily hunt anything but the wild dogs, and that all dogs are trainable. And I said, well, go tell that to the farmer. Like, sure, I'll just catch this dog and train it up.
Catch him, train him.
Even though he's lived his life out as a feral. And it's just an interesting concept that people are just so attached to dogs because so many people have dogs in their house. And I mean, my dog was sitting just here just 2 seconds ago, and I absolutely love her to bits. But at the same time, I know that it's a very different creature when it's out in the wild.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing with like the ranchers and farmers. Like that's a tough, ranching and farming is tough business. And so for those guys, if it represented a threat to my livelihood, I'd make it a pretty easy decision to make. So I haven't. And then we have coyotes, which are I don't. How big are your wild dogs that you're hunting?
Like I guess like a small Whistler, like a female Whistler, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So that's like a little bit bigger than coyotes. So coyotes are smallish, and then the wolves here will be 150 pounds. Like they get big, they'll be 6 foot. The coyotes are a little smaller. The coyotes, they're hunted like, sort of all the time, any way you want, rifles and calls and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Wow. And so how about on the mountain lion front?
Never hunted mountain lions. Yeah, I don't have any experience with it. Mostly, I think I think that's almost all dogs. They'll run hounds and they'll tree them and then shoot them that way. I don't think you can bait mountain lions because they're more predators rather than scavengers.
Yeah.
I've never seen. I've spent hundreds of hours in the woods. I've never seen a mountain lion with my eyes. I've seen tracks. But yeah, they're elusive. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how guys hunt them, but I think it's mostly dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting to me. It's pretty bizarre. I've got like a full Native American tribal tattoo. I've got things like bisons and wolves and bears and everything. And the things that pique my interest the most are actually usually elk and your mountain lions, the cougars. They're just, I think they're just such a fascinating creature. But on the front of actual attacks and things like that, is it something that you guys have to worry about when you're out in the wild? Like, I mean, the bear front, obviously grizzlies are more aggressive, but how about your mountain lions and your wolves?
Yeah. So I've had interaction with wolves a few times. It's not something I worry about. I don't usually even carry a handgun with me when I'm out in the woods. If I've got my bow, I've never had a problem with predators. We've had a couple different interactions with bears, where we hunt. It's all black bears, no grizzlies. Grizzlies are a whole different matter. You got to take grizzly safety really seriously. They're aggressive. With black bears, really the only time you have a problem is if you get around a sow with cubs. And so we have had a couple interactions with cubs and sows, but never really bad ones. And the wolves, the biggest threat with wolves is dogs. They'll get a hold of your dog. They'll kill dogs all the time. They tend to be more afraid of people. And so the stories that you hear about with cougars is guys that are cow calling. If you're going around making elk noises, sometimes they'll come in. My uncle actually got stalked by a mountain lion about 15 years ago. He had a mountain lion sneak out on a set. He turned around and there was a cat, 15 yards behind him that had snuck in, that'll wake you up.
Yeah,
that it was the end. It ran off once it saw him. But no, it's not a big concern. It's not something that we actively plan for. Like I said, as long as we're not in grizzly country, we do have some grizzlies over in eastern Idaho and then up in northern Idaho, but nowhere that I hunt. And so it's not an active concern. It's not something that we plan for or really have to do a lot of thinking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. You hear about people being so scared of Australia, but I think I literally saw my first snake when out hunting just this year. After being out in the bush for so many hours, and I just saw the first, and it was a red-bellied black snake, which is reasonably venomous. It wouldn't kill you. But people think about we've got so much stuff over here that can kill us, and maybe it's just because of the location I'm hunting. But I think the thing that would scare me most is maybe crocodiles up north. But even then, if you're not wading the shallow water, you should be fine.
Yeah, we have rattlesnakes, so diamondback rattlers, which are reasonably venomous. It's the biggest worry with those is your dog. It's back to that, like if you're out chukar hunting, which tends to be like kind of deserty, rocky country, which is where the snakes are. Your bird dogs can get into snakes and get bit, which can be problematic. It won't usually kill a human. It's a bad day if you get bit by a rattlesnake, but it'll kill a dog. And so most chukar hunters will carry like an anti-venom, like a snake bite kit to be able to treat a dog if they get bit by a rattlesnake.
And have you been successful with your bow and mule deer?
Yeah. Yep. I've killed, let me think, 3 different mule deer with my bow, which is, there's not a lot of guys that love to do that because it's open country, it's dry, it's noisy. So I've killed 2 does and then 1 buck with my bow. And it's just, what I've learned is that's a game of patience. It's a game of failure. Like you spend a lot of time. What I love about it, because you get favorable seasons, you get to hunt early and you get to hunt late compared to rifle hunting. So you get a lot of interaction with the animal. You spend a lot of time around them, and sneaking up on them. But your success rate tends to be pretty low. So if you don't love it, it's the wrong game to play. If you're just trying to put meat in the freezer with deer, definitely around here, the game is rifle hunting. And
they're very hypersensitive, right? Like they've got incredibly good
yeah,
skills and
Yeah, the great, they've got these huge ears that, they look like a mule. It's what they call mule deer. These huge ears, good eyes, good nose. The strategy that we found is the best for hunting mule deer. So where we're hunting, like I said, it's kind of this high desert. And so you get these rimrock cliffs, like 10, 12 foot rimrock cliffs. Mm-hmm. And so what we'll do is we'll sneak around the edge of the rimrock and just sneak up to the edge and poke over. And you're trying to find them bedded down below the rimrock. And so you'll poke over, sneak back, go another 50 yards, poke over, sneak back, because that's that rimrock. Getting on that different elevation really changes their ability to hear you. And also it disrupts the wind, all kinds of good things happen. And so that's the way that we've created the most success mule deer hunting out in the desert is kind of rimrock hunting. The other thing that guys will do that we haven't had a lot of success with is because they're really active in the morning and at night, and then they tend to bed down during the day. Yeah. So a lot of guys, I've seen a lot of videos of guys that will glass them up in the morning. They'll put them in bed. They'll see where they bed down, and they'll go sneak in on them. But I don't know if I'm too loud or what. Like I'm not as sneaky as all these other guys because we haven't had luck sneaking in on deer in beds. We chased a lot of deer around the desert, but haven't done a lot of shooting at them.
Yeah, no, I can 100% relate to that.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I'm going to have to actually bail because I've got a fair bit on this morning, unfortunately, but it's been a good conversation.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, man.
Hopefully we can maybe do it again sometime because I'd love to actually hear some of the full in-depth stories, and it's just cool. I think it's just really cool to kind of hear the difference between the American and the Australian, the models that we have here, and just to swap hunting stories is always fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I really appreciate you having me. And anytime I'd be glad to come back anytime you say the good word.
Unreal. Let's do it then. Thanks heaps, Cam.
All right. See you, buddy.
That wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, team. If you did have any topics, questions, or you wanted to suggest a guest for Becoming a Bowhunter, you can send me an email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. If you're enjoying the show or you've enjoyed in particular episodes, please do me a solid and share it around with your friends. If you are not already, please hit the subscribe button, as the more subscribers we get, the higher the podcast gets ranked, and that definitely helps out for showing it to other individuals. If you are not already following me on Instagram, it's at becomingabowhunter.podcast. And on YouTube, it's Becoming a Bowhunter. Get out, team. Fling some arrows. Get that practice in and walk those yards in the paddocks until you find those critters. That is it for now, but not the last time that you'll hear from Becoming a Bowhunter.